evening, everyone. We have 1 minute until we start the meeting. We'll start at 6 o'clock sharp this evening. Hope everyone has had a good day so far. Look forward to our meeting this evening. Good evening and welcome to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen's business meeting for Monday, April 27th, 2020. It's currently 6 p.m. We'll call this meeting to order. And as normal, the last two meetings now, we are doing this through a cyber meeting. At this time, I'd like to ask that Patrick Lawton provide the invocation for this evening. Mr. Lawton.
Thank you, Mayor. Let us pray. Precious Lord, give us the guidance in this meeting, because a lack of guidance can cause nations to fall. But victory is won through many advisors. Lord, let us not be misguided in this meeting so that we do not lead to decisions that produce ineffective results. I pray that you direct our steps so this meeting can achieve your kingdom's aims. We place you at the center of this. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. Of course, we welcome everyone that is in attendance and watching at home or that are watching through their computer this evening. We do have a statement to read regarding the meeting this evening and why it's in this format. All local governing bodies in the state of Tennessee have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Germantown is no exception. In an effort to carry out its governance and operational responsibilities lawfully and effectively, while also considering the protection of public health, safety, and welfare, Germantown City Administration has taken steps to conduct Board of Mayor and Aldermen and other public meetings electronically. These actions were taken in response to Governor Bill Lee's Executive Order 16, which suspended the requirements of the Tennessee Open Meetings Act to the extent necessary to allow governing bodies subject to that act to meet and conduct essential business by electronic means. The Germantown Board of Mayor and Aldermen has determined that meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of its citizens in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Further, notice of such electronic meetings has been and will continue to be published in the same manner as is currently used for regular meetings. The public is also and will continue to be able to view the agenda and have live access to the actual meetings by electronic means, by logging in to Germantown's webpage and by clicking the appropriate link. Video recordings of the meeting will be made available as soon as practical after each meeting on the city's website at www.germantown-tn.gov. These measures are temporary and are due to expire on May 18th, 2020, unless further action is taken by Governor Lee. With that said, I'd like to ask our city clerk to call the roll to establish a quorum, please. Clerk.
Alderman Sanders.
Here.
Alderman Gibson.
Here.
Alderman Massey. Alderman Massey. Alderman Owens.
I'm here.
Vice Mayor Yonda.
I'm here.
Thank you. Let the record establish, or let the record reflect, we do have a quorum. And I'll make another call as Alderman Massey on the meeting this evening. We do have a quorum set. Now we move to item 4 on the agenda, setting of the agenda. The agenda was printed to the public ahead of time last Wednesday. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
Move to approve.
There's a motion by Vice Mayor Yonda. Is there a second?
Second.
So motion and a second. Please call the roll.
I'd like to offer an amendment, Mayor.
And your amendment?
If it's possible, I would like to ask that we postpone agenda item number 9 until such time that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen can hold meetings in person at City Hall, please.
That's brought forth in the form of a amendment to setting the agenda to postpone item 9 until further notice. Is there a second? For failure of a second, the item is null. That brings us back to the original motion. It's been properly moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Alderman Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Owens,
You're still
Alderman
muted.
Owens,
I'm sorry, yes.
Alderman Yonda.
Yes.
Thank you. The agenda has been set and carries. That brings us to item 5 on the agenda this evening, approval of the minutes. These are the minutes from the regularly scheduled meeting on April 13th, 2020. The minutes were presented to the public. Are there any corrections or modifications at this particular time? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve them. This is Rocky.
Vice Mayor approves, that moves to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Mayor, can I have a point of order, please?
Sure.
Could someone check, I believe Alderman Massey may be on the meeting, but he believes he's muted by some other means other than himself. Is that possible?
We'll have our IT director check that. And thank you for that point of order. Thank you. Is there there was a first by Vice Mayor Yonda. Is there a second on the minutes?
Second.
So motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Alderman Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders.
Yes.
Thank you. The minutes have been approved. That brings us to,
Before we proceed to the next one, Mayor, would it be possible to see if IT's been able to check on that for us?
IT is here in the building and is efforting that as we speak. So we will get to that when that is. It looks like he's chatted in that he's given instructions to Alderman Massey. That brings us to item 6 on the agenda this evening, citizens to be heard. As you're aware, citizens to be heard was made available to the public at the, I guess, at the release of the packet to the community for this particular meeting's agenda on Wednesday. The public had a dedicated email address and were able to log in and supply citizens to be heard up to 2 o'clock today. And those emails were provided to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for their review and reading. Clerk Betty, would you please give a recap of citizens to be heard for this particular meeting?
Yes, Mayor, there were 73 citizens coming forward regarding the Dogwood cell tower. 41 are in favor and 32 oppose the proposed location. 2 citizens came forward with concerns regarding reopening the Germantown Community Library at this stage of the pandemic. 2 citizens came forward with concerns regarding budget cuts concerning the Germantown School District. That's all, Mayor.
Thank you, Clerk. Those citizens to be heard submittals will be recorded into the record, the permanent record of this board meeting. That brings us to item 7 on the agenda, the preliminary agenda. I will read those items and then accept a motion. Item 7A, appointment to the Financial Advisory Commission. Frank Monteleone has made that request. Item 7B, donations to the Education Commission totaling $7,300. Item 7C,
Hello.
donations. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Alderman
Mayor.
Massey, thank you. Welcome to the meeting.
Mayor, I'd like to raise
Item 7,
at this time. Mayor, I'd like to raise a point of order. Whatever business has been conducted, I think we need to redo this. I have it recorded that someone on your end muted my call. So it was done on your end, not mine. And I think we need to take these votes over again. Whatever's been voted on up to this point, I think we, out of fairness, I was on the call and someone on your end muted me.
I think everyone was muted at one particular time before the meeting started. So I'm not sure on that completely. We're currently on item 7 of the agenda, and I'm going through that currently right now. Item 7C, donations, Germantown Community Library, $9,471. Item 7D, grant for the Big Read, totaling $12,800. Item 9E, reimbursement, overtime for police, $10,030 from Homeland Security and $1,708 from a private vendor. Item F, rejections, multiple bids and proposals. Item G, development contract number 1229 and final plan approval, the learning experience. Item 9H, development contract number 1230, Evangelical Christian School. Is there a motion to adopt the preliminary agenda as presented?
I move to approve it.
There's a motion by the Vice Mayor. Is there a second?
Second.
There is a second by Alderman Gibson. Please call the roll.
Alderman Massey,
Yes.
Alderman Owens,
I'm good.
Alderman Owens,
I apologize. I will vote yes on all items with the exception of item H, which is the development contract for the Evangelical Christian School. As some of you know, I back up to that ECS school and I will have to abstain from that vote.
Well, point of order, Mayor.
Yes, your point of order, Alderman?
I don't see how we're approving the preliminary agenda. If Alderman Owens wanted to have that pulled so that he didn't have to vote on it, then I think the proper procedure would have been to have that agenda item pulled when we were setting the agenda to begin with.
Thank you for your point of order. Alderman Owens, I would ask that you reconsider your statement. I think you can make the statement that you have a conflict with item, I've already forgotten the item number, item H, and you can vote accordingly. That has occurred before over the years. Would you like to do that at this time?
Mayor, I will just abstain from the consent agenda.
Oh, thank you then, Alderman. Go ahead, continue with the vote.
Alderman Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Alderman Gibson.
Yes.
Thank you. The preliminary agenda has been approved. That brings us to,
Point of order, Mayor, please.
yes, go ahead.
I would like to ask you to reconsider Alderman Massey's point of order earlier. I did make a motion during setting of the agenda to postpone one item. Perhaps if he had been unmuted, he may have supported that. If we don't start over on the entire agenda, I would move that we at least be allowed to reconsider postponing that agenda item number 9. I could make that motion when that comes around if that's how you want to handle it.
I think that would be suitable, Alderman. That item can be heard, and then you can make a motion once it's put on the table. You can make any motion or amendment, so we can handle it in that fashion. Thank you. Thank you for your point of order as well.
Thank you.
That brings us to item 8 on the regular agenda. Ordinance.
Point of order.
Yes.
Point of order, Mayor. The problem as I see it is that shortens the length of time to discuss whether or not it should have been on the agenda to begin with. I think the appropriate action would be for us to vote on setting the agenda again, because Alderman's right. Alderman Sanders is correct. I will vote to support postponing that agenda item or removing it from the agenda. And I think the appropriate action is to allow that discussion to take place during the setting of the agenda.
Thank you for your comments. They are duly noted. The agenda has been set and we are on the regular agenda, and there'll be an opportunity to speak to item 9 at that particular time. Item 8, ordinance 2020-05, rezoning of 9695 Poplar Avenue from O office to RE residential estate, third and final reading. I believe Mr. Ross will be making that presentation this evening. Director Ross.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. I will switch over to a screen now. So hopefully you're all seeing ordinance 2020-05, rezoning from O office to RE residential estate, 9695 Poplar Avenue, third and final reading. This property is on the east side of town. We are considering a rezoning in its third reading for this. Criteria to determine a change in the neighborhood to justify a rezoning: changes in population, both of the area to be proposed and in the surrounding areas, changes in those existing road patterns or traffic, including volumes, and also including development of new roadways. The need for the rezoning based upon changes in whatever is classified as the neighborhood, which may not necessarily be limited to what one would think of as a relatively concise area, and which may include changes in population, development trends, existing character of nearby property, and or changes that have occurred in the character of the nearby property, and the request of the change in the zoning, adjoining, or nearby property. So the request in front of you is for just over 7 acres of property that is residential use already, and the current property owner would like to rezone that property so that they can add to the existing structure or expand the existing non-conforming residential use. They chose to go with the residential estate option due to the size of the lot that they have, as well as their ability to have a couple of extra structures within that zoning classification. This does step down the zoning appropriately and does align with road network plans and the lack of office development in this area, since this was annexed into the city under the office zoning as part of the last annexation in 2000. Happy to answer any questions. I think that we've gone over a lot of this stuff in the first 2 readings. So with that, I can be open to any questions.
Thank you, Director Ross, for your presentation. Is there a motion to approve on third and final reading ordinance 2020-05, the rezoning of 9695 Poplar Avenue from O office to RE residential estate? Is there a motion?
So moved.
So was that Alderman Owens on that?
It was, and also Alderman Sanders, I think, but I'll
Okay.
second her first.
Alderman Owens brought forth the motion. Was there a second? Again, please.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Alderman Sanders. Alderman Owens, would you like the floor, sir?
Sorry, still trying to figure out my mute button. No, I don't have any comments. We've gone through this. This is the third reading, as Cameron pointed out, and I think it's pretty straightforward rezoning request, actual downzoning of property.
Thank you. Alderman Sanders, would you like the floor, sir?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Massey,
Yes.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Alderman Gibson.
Yes.
The motion carries and passes. We move now to item 9 on the agenda, development contract number 1228 and final site plan approval, Dogwood Elementary School, new cell tower. Director Ross has the presentation.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Mayor.
this is Mac McCarroll.
Oh, okay,
Uh,
sorry.
I have to alert y'all at this point that I got to turn the legal reins over to Bob McLean. Birch Porter and Johnson represents Tower Ventures, the cell tower company involved in this matter. Therefore, I have to recuse myself, and I will let Bob take over the legal reins from this point.
Thank you, Attorney McCarroll, and welcome to the meeting, Attorney McLean. Director, would you like to go ahead and make your presentation?
Mayor,
Yes.
just some of you know that my daughter attends Dogwood Elementary and has been impacted by the current application and the intense opposition that there has been at the school. I'm happy to discuss this in greater detail with anyone who wishes to contact me regarding the matter, but as a result of this, I abstained for voting on this application at the Planning Commission level as well as the Design Review Commission level, and I intend to do the same tonight. I will recuse myself from all discussions and votes pertaining to this matter.
Let the record reflect the comments made by Alderman Owens. Thank you, Alderman, and please mute your phone as well. Director Ross, would you like to make the presentation, please?
Point of order,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes, Alderman Sanders.
Just quickly, I'm not familiar with Mr. McLean. I'm assuming he does not work with Birch, Porter and Johnson and is in a separate firm. Is that correct? Or could we have some further information?
Sure, I'll let
And Mr. Mayor, I'm
the attorney go ahead.
Can you see me?
No, but we can hear you loud and clear if you'd like to go ahead and articulate who you work for and what role you represent with the city.
Yeah. Well, I'm an attorney with Ferris Babango Brown in Memphis, Tennessee. And I have been counsel for the city for the Design Review Commission for these many years, probably 20 some odd. And I have functioned in the past as counsel for the city when there have been issues with the town attorney. And I've been asked tonight to serve as counsel on this particular issue due to the fact that the city attorney's firm has to recuse itself because of their relationship with their client, which is Tower Ventures. So, Alderman Sanders, I think that addresses your question, but if you have any more questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. I just think that would benefit the city residents, just so they know how we're proceeding moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman, for your point of order as well. And go ahead, Director Ross, for your presentation.
Mayor, I do have some questions for Attorney McLean.
And they pertain to, you have a point of order, a point of inquiry?
Point of inquiry based on something
Sure.
that's just come to our attention during this meeting.
What's your point of inquiry? Your point of inquiry is generally an informational question. Point of order is one on process. You have a question that you'd like to ask?
I do. Attorney McLean, this is the first time that Birch, Porter and Johnson has disclosed their conflict of interest, although I have previously asked them if they represented any telecommunications companies. They never disclosed that they actually represented Tower Ventures. The city has provided legal advice and to a number of our commissions as well as to the school board. We use the city employees to help work out the agreement between Tower Ventures and the school board. By we, I mean the city, the mayor's office. I didn't have anything to do with it. But
Alderman Massey, we understand your question. Go ahead. Now the school board has its own. The school board has its own attorney. We'll let Mr. McLean. He has actually represented the city every step of the way on this particular application and made those disclosures at the Planning Commission level, where he represented the city and made that publicly known. Attorney McLean, would you like to expand on that a little bit?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. When this issue first came up, I was approached by the city and informed that, actually the city attorney informed me that they had a problem because they represented Tower Ventures. Could I please substitute for them and counsel the city on these issues? That meant that I would be counsel at the Planning Commission and also at the Design Review Commission, that I would be engaged in discussions and drafting a development contract with the attorney for the school board. So Birch Porter has not been involved in any aspect of this project, to the best of my knowledge, since it first came up. And I've been the one who has been responsible for counseling the city as to the proper procedures and the protocol. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Attorney McLean. Do you have any, Alderman Massey, we're about to have a presentation. You can ask your questions at that particular time, sir.
No, I'm asking the question of the attorney because this is important, and I think we need to know it before we go forward. I'd like to know when Mr. McLean's engagement letter is dated.
I don't know that there's an engagement letter per se. I've been retained by the city of Germantown for some odd 20 years. I'm reappointed every year. And I, serve at the pleasure of the mayor, and when asked to or when given tasks, then I respond, and that's the situation here.
What was the date that you began your involvement in this particular issue?
I don't know the date, but I can tell you it was the first time that it came up on any agenda.
All right, let's continue with the presentation. Mr. McLean, Attorney McLean, is a member of the city attorney staff and was appointed by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and works for the city on these matters. Director Ross, go ahead and make your presentation, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Is everyone able to see my screen at this point?
Yes.
So the item in front of you tonight is the development contract 1228 and the final site plan approval. Those are the two decisions to consider as part of this. Just to cover a little bit of historical ground, on September 25th, 2018, the Board of Education for GMSD approved an option and land lease agreement with Tower Ventures for a new cell tower at the school. Per section 2386C2, wireless transmission facilities are allowed within our residential districts with the approval of a use on appeal approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals. On December 11th, 2018, the BZA granted a use on appeal to allow a cell tower at Dogwood Elementary School. Both the Planning Commission and Design Review Commission granted approval of the new cell tower in its original location at their meetings on February 2nd, 2019 and March 28th, 2019, respectively. That request did not advance to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for review and approval based on discussions around how we could make it better, how we could find a different location that met more of a compromise position. On May 22nd, 2019, the Planning Commission Subcommittee reviewed a revised location for the tower, still located on Dogwood Elementary School property, but within the regular limits of the Dogwood Park. The applicant withdrew this request. During that time, we continued to work with the applicant on opportunities for revised locations. On January 13th, 2020, the GMSD Board of Education approved an amended option and land lease agreement with Tower Ventures for a third revised location of the cell tower that is now being requested. The Planning Commission approved this on February 4th, 2020, and the Design Review Commission recommended approval of this request on February 25th, 2020. The applicant has revised the location based on the criteria laid out in 2386 H and I. This parcel must have a minimum of 200 feet of public street frontage. The tower must be set back from property lines a minimum distance of the tower's height plus 10 feet. All associated buildings and structures must meet the minimum setback distances of the zoning district. The applicant's engineer must provide documentation that the cell tower meets or exceeds the ANSI standards for radio frequency emissions. The maximum tower height is 140 feet. The tower shall be designed for shared use. They received justified exemptions based on their application for structures meeting the minimum setback distance of the zoning district. The northernmost playground of the Dogwood Park area is located 35 feet from the cell tower, less the cell tower's 140 feet as required. The developer has provided a revised technical letter that assures the cell tower's fall zone to be 25 feet, and they have also indicated a willingness to move the playground into this area. As a follow-up to this, the Parks and Recreation Department has determined that the playground equipment currently resides outside of the approved TDEC grant area that the playground equipment was proffered under. So that playground equipment must be moved into the TDEC grant area. The applicant has again agreed to move this playground equipment at their expense to a location to be determined by both the City of Germantown Parks Department and agreed upon by TDEC as part of the grant requirements. The applicant has provided an amended letter based on some of the questions that have been received up to this point regarding the standards and their alignment within the zoning code. It goes to say that those standards are a little complicated with structural engineering standards, but based on the review of it, the International Building Code 2015 has been modified since our code was modified and adopted by Shelby County. The 2015 IBC has been adopted by Shelby County, which is the permit issuing body. In review of the applicant's structural engineering requirements, the requirements that they have presented in their previous letter and also verified independently by Kimley Horn Structural Engineering Group, and then also with an updated letter today from the Structural Engineering Group from Tower Ventures. They've stated that the standards that they are building this under meet the current 2015 building standards and are exceeding in the material standard burden that was set forth in the previous ANSI standards that are cited within our zoning code. So I hope that that is relatively clear at this point on the fall zone standards and the letters that were provided to justify that position of the fall zone. And then future movement of that playground equipment will be considered as soon as this development contract is approved and the location of the cell tower is determined. The second justified exemption was the requirement of a minimum buffer strip of 50 feet that's supposed to consist of landscaping and screening that's required on the outer perimeter of the property. This would have required a significant screening buffer to be at the perimeter of the Dogwood Elementary School property at the Dogwood Road intersection where the school property starts on the north end. While the proposed revised location of the cell tower and equipment are set back well over 50 feet from the outer perimeter of the property, there's not a 50-foot landscaping and screening buffer at the perimeter. The equipment enclosure in the landscaping plan that I'll touch on in just a moment screens the enclosure from public view at the street with existing and proposed landscaping. And the Design Review Commission approved alterations to this as part of their ability. So just to touch on a couple things, the proposed tower location is tucked further into the existing trees on the south end of the Dogwood Elementary School property. The location has moved to 180 feet away from the closest building structure and 35 feet away from the previously mentioned playground equipment. This is a closer in view of that playground equipment and site plan detail as it was approved by the Planning Commission and the Design Review Commission. They both approved a monopine cell tower design at 140 feet. That tower location and the modified location required the removal of several trees in the area. So this is a tree mitigation plan, and you have trees that are on the northern side of the dogwood drop-off area, trees that are on the eastern side of the property, trees that are in front of the enclosure, and trees that are on the western side of the property. The applicant also submitted that as part of their buffer requirements, a landscape detail that's shown here that also includes the, you can see the X's are the trees that are going to be removed as part of the construction of the equipment enclosure and the access drive. The equipment enclosure will be built on a raised and level platform with a retaining wall and an 8-foot secure fence on top of that. So in some places, it will be approximately 12 feet high as approved by the DRC and the Planning Commission. Again, going back to a couple different reviews of this, the location is here in this large red circle approximately. Looking from Dogwood Road South, the purple outline is a future tree that would be planted as part of the tree mitigation plan. And you can see the monopine tower at this point looking south from Dogwood Road. Looking from Ashmere, the monopine is called out to the left of your screen, and you can see to the right of your screen the playground equipment and the scale, the rise of the land and the other topographic conditions out there show that there's a little bit less of an impact visually on this side. You can see that this was taken in the wintertime when there are very few leaves on the trees. Looking from Willinghurst and looking to the east, this would be the view from that particular photo simulated effort. Again, going back to the revised site plan, the access drive would be from the traffic circle on the southern end of the property and would go along the tree line and access into the enclosure. And again, just further detail with existing underbrush cleared and removed. Now, I've touched on all of the different particular requests of this. The applicant, as stated, requested a higher fence on top of the retaining wall, and that was in compliance with 2386 I1D, and they will have additional plantings around the equipment enclosure. The applicant is not proposing any lighting. The applicant has provided all of the appropriate technical and construction drawings for a 140-foot tower reviewed by the engineering department of the city of Germantown. They've also provided the appropriate security and insurance requirements and have provided signed development agreements. This does meet Germantown Forward 2030 in the key performance area of technology. Strategic objective number 1, having a citywide technological infrastructure that supports and sustains individual, educational, government, and business demands. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to leave these slides up as discussion goes, or I can back out of them.
Thank you for your presentation, Director Ross. We appreciate that, very thorough. Is there a motion to approve development contract number 1228 and the final site plan for a new cell tower on the Dogwood Elementary School property located at 8945 Dogwood Road? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
The motion by Alderman Yonda. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by Alderman Gibson. Vice Mayor Yonda, would you like the floor at this time?
Yes, this has been going on for over a year now. I have listened to and had many conversations with citizens throughout the city. I am the liaison for and chair of the cell service task force. And it's always been my feeling that this was a public safety issue, and both fire and police have agreed that we need coverage in this area, that we have a tendency to lose contact with our police and fire in those areas. Our IT director, along with cell phone companies, has shown us that this is a very underserved area. I have two grandsons at Dogwood, and luckily they haven't gone through what Alderman Owen's children have. I think this is extremely important for the public safety. Several people have told me that they have had trouble with 911. I believe it's over 75% of our 911 calls come in on cell phones. It's extremely important that we have cell service in this area and all areas of the city. I realize that some people are against this. I realize we have an awful lot of people that are for it. We have to make a decision that's best for our citizens, and that's what I will be doing. I'll be voting for this. It's extremely important that we have cell coverage in this area and all areas of the city. There's an awful lot of misinformation out there, and it's important to wander through that. I don't know what else to say other than that this has been going on a long time. 3 commissions that were citizen commissions have approved this. The Germantown Municipal School Board has approved this, and now it's our turn to approve it also. And we have had legal advice that it would be inappropriate for us to decline this. We have been sued once before and lost the legal battle in trying to keep a cell tower from coming down. But that's not the reason I'm voting for it. I'm voting for it because it is the right thing to do for our community. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Alderman Gibson, would you like the floor at this time?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I would like first to thank each of the citizens who've reached out to me via email, both to voice their opposition and support of this proposed tower. I've met with many of you in person back when we could safely meet in person, and over the last few weeks, certainly via video conferencing, phone calls, and email. And there's no doubt in my mind about the passion and the concern. I know that it's heartfelt, and I find concerned parents and citizens on both sides of this very complex and important issue. And so to say that I value both perspectives as a former Dogwood Dolphin who has dear friends that are still there, who also has grandchildren, friends who have grandchildren there. I certainly feel like I have heard those concerns over this 18-month process. And I'm very clear about what my role is here, is to do my due diligence and to listen to both sides, to weigh all the facts and make an informed decision based on what I know today on behalf of the citizens of Germantown. There have been some questions that have been answered for me recently that I would like to make sure that the public is aware of. One having to do with our Germantown City Code, the towers having a height restriction of 140 feet. There was some question about why will the tower actually be 148 feet. It's actually not. It still is 140 feet. There is an 8-foot allowance for a lightning rod. It's called an appurtenance. But Mr. Ross, if I could just ask a couple of questions that we've spoken about leading up to tonight, but I think it would be helpful. Again, these were coming from the greater public, some of which we've already discussed, and certainly in your presentation regarding the fall zone. Again, the safety of the children is paramount. And so those fall zone requirements, I know that there was a question about whether or not the accuracy of the letter from the engineer as far as the wind speeds and things. Can you, I heard you say it during your presentation, but could you specifically say something? Put that in.
Yes, ma'am. The citation by the structural engineer, as it was submitted to us originally, is a reference within the 2015 International Building Code, which Shelby County adopts and reviews permits under. The ANSI section referenced within our code as it relates to wind speeds and other material loads is much older. So at this point, based on, again, a revised letter that was provided to us this afternoon, which I'm happy to put up on the screen, as well as independent verification from our on-call engineers with Kimley Horn, shows that the standards referenced by the applicant's engineer are equal to or greater than the standards referenced within our code. However, they are apples and oranges because they are different load standards. But as best as a structural engineer can verify, the standards, the new standards, the updated standards are greater and improved than the standards that were referenced within our code. But the letter provided by Tower does say that they will design the tower to meet and exceed the following standards as required by the local jurisdiction, which is the 70 mile per hour with half-inch radial ice as per ANSI standards, 100 mile per hour with 130 mile per hour 3-second wind gust, along with a structure class 2, topographic category 1, crest height of 0 feet, seismic zone 3, that results in a fall zone radius of less than 25 feet.
Okay, thank you. That helps. And the last question that I've got would be regarding the status of the FCC environmental review. Can you expound on that?
Director Ross, and Alderman Gibson, that'll need to wait to your second round. You are concluded for your 5-minute first round, but if you wish a second.
I appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to hearing what our liaison with the Technology Commission has to say. So I will wait for round 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion?
Mayor?
Yes, Alderman Sanders, you have the floor.
I'd like to make a motion at this time before I go into a line of questioning to ask that the board consider postponing this vote and the rest of this hearing until such time as we can meet at City Hall in person and allow our residents to participate. I know everyone knows that we have.
Can you set a specific date? That is somewhat arbitrary. We're not sure when we will move back to some form of normalcy. But if you could give a specific date, which would be really good.
Okay, since we don't know, we don't have any guidance from the city yet on when you're going to open up our city hall and allow meetings in person. So I would ask that we postpone it till our first meeting in July, with the caveat that we could move that up should we start having in-person meetings prior to that. And
your motion would be to postpone to July the 13th.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And just as a clarification, this is not a public hearing. This is a traditional agenda item. So anyway, just wanted to make sure the record reflected that. So there's a motion to postpone agenda item 9 till July 13th. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please
Yes,
call. Yes, go ahead.
Mayor,
Alderman.
thank you. I would simply, my statement would be simply this, that uh, after the length of time that we've been at this, certainly back and forth with the school board, from the original site to the revised site, I with all due respect, I don't see making a delay of a vote where if the number one reason for many of us that or at least for me, that would be voting for this proposed tower is public safety, I can't imagine why we would want to delay that any further. And I don't discount the fact that we are in the middle of a pandemic, a global health issue that we've never experienced before. I will say, out of the 73 emails, again, I was actually thrilled to read every single one of them. I don't think that I'm unclear about what a concerned parent that has children at that school, I don't think I'm unclear about what their concerns are. But we are in a unique position in that we are hearing from both sides, concerned folks that are worried that their EKG information is not getting to their doctor in real time. And so I am not in support of postponing, and that is why.
Thank you, Alderman Gibson. Further discussion?
I just bring the motion forward, Mayor, because a great number of citizens and residents have not only emailed me, but called me and asked us to consider postponing this so they could have the opportunity to be there in person and listen to the presentations and make comments in person rather than the accommodations we've made via email. I have attended several of the other commission meetings that were held in relation to this. The last at the Planning Commission, there was not an empty seat in City Hall, in the council chambers, and there were even individuals standing out on People Street. So I thought it appropriate to bring this motion and see if I could convince my colleagues to give the citizens that opportunity to come in person and hear this presentation and make their statements in person.
Thank you, Alderman. Further discussion?
Mayor, I do.
Yes, Alderman Massey.
There are a number of residents and parents of children in the school and in the surrounding neighborhood that want the opportunity to speak their citizens to be heard, and attempts to convince us that it is either the right decision or wrong decision to place this cell tower on the school property. I think we owe it to the citizens to have this discussion and this debate at a public meeting. I think we owe it to the citizens to look them in the eye and vote one way or the other. It's easy to vote when you can't see these folks and see some of the pain in their eyes, whether they're for or against the cell tower. They may very well be concerned about public safety, but a lot of them are concerned about their property values and the safety of their children, quite frankly. And I think we owe it to them to give this debate in person in chambers. And so I fully support Alderman Sanders' motion to postpone this vote. You also had the issue tonight of my microphone being muted at the beginning of the meeting, and it very clearly stated that someone outside of my home muted it. So we would have had extra discussion about whether or not this issue should have even been placed on the agenda. We also learned tonight that there are apparent conflicts rising out of the city attorney's relationship with Tower Ventures that have never been disclosed. While Mr. McLean may have taken over once the agenda item was placed on the agenda, there were discussions that were held with the city attorney prior to any agenda items being placed on the agenda. And the city attorney specifically led efforts to have ordinances changed in the city of Germantown where Tower Ventures was the beneficiary. I contend that there should be some type of investigation into these potential conflicts of interest and determine if, in fact, there was information provided to our city commissions and to the school board that caused them to potentially make a decision in favor of Tower Adventures and against the citizens of Germantown. How much time do I have left?
Approximately 2 minutes.
Germantown City Charter, Article 3, Section 277, has a statement of purpose. It says the foundation of government depends upon public trust and confidence. It is the responsibility of government officials and employees to perform their job in a manner that fosters this public trust by providing quality service, selfless loyalty, and fair dealing. In this instance, I don't think the city has provided fair dealing. Whether you look at the issues of potential conflicts emanating from the city attorney's law firm, the fact that I was muted at the beginning, the fact that certain case law has been cited that wasn't necessarily relevant or didn't provide all the facts relevant to this case in favor of the cell tower over the public, I think we need someone from the state or independent counsel to come in and take a look at this and other potential conflicts of interest. We had situations where we had people who voted on this cell tower, voted in favor of allowing the cell tower to go on the public school property, and then later recused themselves. I think somebody needs to take a look at that. We also had the issue of the LLC, the application showing one member of the LLC. Who are the other members of the LLC, and why are they not disclosed on the application to the city?
Yeah, 15
Can you answer
seconds,
that?
sir.
Can you answer why the LLC only shows one member? Hello, can you answer?
Are you asking a question of staff, or I have no idea on the LLC. I'm not part of the LLC. You have now 5 seconds left. Would you like to conclude your comments?
Well, your staff gave the presentation, so that's something they should know.
That concludes your time on the floor. Further discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Alderman Gibson,
No.
Alderman Massey,
Yes.
Alderman Owens,
Abstain.
Vice Mayor Yonda.
No.
The measure ends in a tie 2-2, and so it fails. We return to the original motion that's on the floor. It's been properly moved and seconded. Further discussion?
Yes, Mayor, I have.
Yes, Alderman Sanders, you're recognized. You have the floor.
Point of order, Mayor.
Yes, your point of order.
If it's a tie, I don't believe the motion would fail.
I will refer to the city attorney on that. A 2-2 tie does not warrant approval.
You're correct, Your Honor.
Yeah, thank you, attorney. Thank you for your point of order. Alderman Sanders, you're recognized.
Point of order.
What is your point of order, sir?
You break a tie. If you're saying that you are voting with a majority, then that's one thing. But we need to have you on record saying that you're voting with a majority. Sure. Otherwise,
sure. Your point is well taken. Clerk, if you would go back to the roll call, if you'd like to call on me, we'll be fine.
Mayor Palazzolo.
Abstain. The measure fails on a tie. Alderman Sanders, you have the floor.
What point of clarification, Mayor? Why are you saying
there's no point of clarification? Point of inquiry or point of order? Which one would you like, sir? Alderman Sanders, what's your question?
Why are you presuming that the motion fails? You may be right.
The city attorney just verified that it is a tie vote. That is simple procedure, parliamentary procedure, and a basic lesson in civics. We can move on now. We have an important matter on the table. Alderman Sanders, you're recognized,
Just
sir.
just go on the record as voting.
I did vote, sir. Alderman
You-
Sanders, you have the floor. Please, Alderman Massey, we're conducting a meeting here. Alderman Sanders, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. I do have some questions on this item. Mayor, if you could have someone address, I think I heard that there was no lighting plan or no lighting proposed. So will this tower have any lights, a red light or a blinking light of any color along the tower?
Director Ross, could you address that question, please?
Mayor, to the Alderman, no, there will be no blinking lights, no lights whatsoever as approved by the Planning Commission and the DRC and presented to you tonight.
Thank you very much. Some of the residents sent emails to the citizens to be heard, and all of us received those. So there's several, just a group of 3 or 4. If I could just list these out, Mayor, and you could have somebody address those, it might be a little faster. I believe you already touched on the fact, or one of the other aldermen did, that the tower does not violate our 140-foot height standard, the 8 feet being the lightning rod. Also, there's questions about the appeal of the FCC's environmental study and whether permits could be issued prior to that being decided, and would our
Alderman Sanders, would you like those addressed one at a time by the director?
I'm thinking that he's probably going to be able to address all these, and he
okay,
may
sure. Continue, please. Please forgive me.
So if we did vote today and this was approved, does that affect the issuance of permits? And many people address the control and admittance of the tower company or maintenance workers during school and on the school grounds, and several indicate displeasure that the tower is being built on a walking trail. So those are just a few, if someone could address those.
Director Ross?
So I'll start with the last one first and work my way back. The tower is not being constructed on any walking path. The point of access will connect briefly to a walking path, but it will be controlled by bollards so that there will be no access by trucks or equipment or anything while people are using the walking path connection area with the bollard. A plan for how to access the site has been worked out with GMSD, and it's in the agreement that Tower Ventures has with GMSD, and it states that all personnel are required to check in with the school before entering. Again, that's part of their private agreement, not necessarily any agreement that would be a part of this approval tonight, nor by any approvals as part of the Planning Commission or the Design Review Commission. In terms of the approval process, we operate in a tandem fashion or a parallel fashion, if you will, in terms of approvals. There are a variety of approvals going on at the same time or in process at the same time, but Shelby County being the body that will issue the building permit and will have their own level of review of this project for wireless transmission facilities in the county, will ultimately issue the final permit once all FCC regulations have been approved, and that does include any revised environmental documents that may be currently under review right now. And we touched on the 140-foot requirement. 140 feet is all the city has seen. and all the city has reviewed and approved through the process outlined before. Did I miss anything in the questions?
I don't believe so. If I have any time left, Mayor, I'd like to ask if you could have someone address an issue that was raised by some of the opponents of the tower about the tower being labeled an attractive nuisance and the city having liability for issues that may arise from that.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I suspect that's really addressed to me.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
You have to keep in mind who the parties are here. Now, an attractive nuisance is a doctrine which is used in tort law, and it's an attractive nuisance only if it's found by a court after a trial. In this case, an attractive nuisance is used to find liability on the part of a tortfeasor. In this case, the tortfeasor would be Tower Ventures or the Germantown School District. The Germantown School District, as I read their agreement, is indemnified by Tower Ventures. So the only person that would be concerned with the issue of liability in this case would be Tower Ventures. The city is not, doesn't have any exposure in this. The city's not, it's not city property. It's Germantown School property, and the contractor with, or the lessor, I guess, or lessee would be Tower Ventures. So they would be the ones who'd be concerned about the issue of, liability and whether it was in fact an attractive nuisance. But the city wouldn't have any liability in that situation.
And it's your opinion that the lease they have, that Germantown Municipal Schools has with Tower Ventures squarely places that liability upon the tower company and not the school district?
Yes, sir. As I recall the contract, that's correct.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Alderman. That concludes your time on the floor. A further discussion?
Yes, Mayor.
Yes, Mayor.
Yes. I'm sorry. Who spoke before Alderman Massey? And was that Vice Mayor or not?
Mayor, is this the
Go ahead. You have the floor, sir. Yeah, the Vice Mayor.
Okay, well, I agree with Alderman Gibson. We have had many venues to review. We've had tremendous number of conversations over the last year. In fact, in my almost 8 years as an alderman, I don't know that we've ever had this long of a conversation on something, or to remember that many public forums that people could go to. I also believe that this email, Citizens to be Heard, is extremely effective to get both sides of what's going on. I'm concerned about both sides. I mentioned before, I have 2 grandsons that are at Dogwood. But delaying this is, in my opinion, a waste of time. I'm also appalled that some of my aldermen don't know who Mr. McLean is. If you've been paying attention, I guess it would be a good idea to go to one of his meetings. He's an excellent lawyer. I also realize that one of our aldermen does not get his emails, which the instructions on how to mute are in the instructions. So I don't think we have to do any kind of double investigation.
Alderman, your point is well made, Alderman Massey. Alderman Yondo, we're
He brought it forward.
on the particular Vice Mayor. We're talking on the tower right now.
But at any rate, I think that it's important that we just move forward. This is an important public safety. That's the bottom line. Public safety. We should never shortchange those efforts. And I'm assured by the number of people who are proponents for this are far more massive than those that are against it. So at any rate, I will be voting for this. And I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Alderman Massey, you're recognized.
like to address two things that my colleagues have said. The first is the matter of public safety. There is not really any evidence that this is going to particularly have an impact on public safety one way or the other, but politicians in general always use public safety if they want to have some way of pushing through something without having much resistance. You can tie it to children, or they can tie it to public safety, and that is a very clever way of marginalizing people on the opposite side. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was something that Alderman Sanders said about the attractive nuisance. You know, as government officials, as elected officials, we're not only concerned about the tort liability that might be incurred as a result of a child climbing up the fence or up the tower, getting into some harmful substance in the tower. It goes beyond the tort liability. We are tasked with the responsibility. We literally have a duty to protect the public welfare. And so one of the points of the letter, while it referenced tort law and tort damages, isn't just isolated to tort liability. It also goes beyond that to what our duties are as elected officials. And it is a duty of ours not to place an attractive nuisance in the middle of a children's playground outside the classrooms of an elementary school. So for that reason alone, I think it should be sufficient for all of my colleagues to vote against this tower. It is an attractive nuisance. It does have the potential to have children climb the fence and get harmed by this cell tower, not to mention the potential health effects that could harm the children in the classrooms. I think that's a legitimate concern and something that needs to be listened to. I think that's another reason to postpone this vote. From what I understand is that at some of our previous commission meetings, parents were prohibited from expressing their concerns about the health. We as aldermen may have restrictions on applying that solely as our justification for voting against the cell tower, but that doesn't mean the citizens should have been prohibited from discussing that in the public meetings. That's their right. It's their right to petition us for changes under whatever reasons they may have. The mayor as chair may not allow it during our board meetings, but our citizens should be allowed to discuss it. They should be allowed to ask us to consider it. And that hasn't been done. So in my opinion, due to the conflicts of interest, due to the the citizens that were shut down in the meetings, and a number of other reasons, I think that this entire issue should go back to the beginning. Would this outcome have been different at the school board level if we had a city attorney or we had city staff who was getting advice from an unbiased counsel? What would their decision have been about the contract? There's also the issue of Tower Ventures' own representatives also representing the school board. Mr. Fahey represents Tower Ventures and the school board. I mean, I'm sorry, but from my perspective, it seems like this entire vote was rigged from the very beginning, with Tower Ventures having all of their representatives on every side of the issue. Who's been looking out for the citizens? Who's been looking out for the children in that school? It's a real concern of mine. I find this very troubling. Now, I oppose allowing this cell tower to be erected outside of the elementary school classrooms on a playground for children. I don't believe it's an appropriate role for government to arbitrarily convert the public's property for the private benefit of a cell tower corporation or any other for-profit corporation for that matter. I contend that if the cell tower company provided enough money and monetary incentive, the cell tower company could find a seller who is willing to lease or sell property on land that would allow the cell tower to be located further from the elementary school.
15 seconds, Alderman.
I'll hold the rest of my comments for the next round.
Thank you, Alderman Massey. Further discussion?
Yes, Mayor.
Alderman Sanders, you have the floor, sir.
First, I'd just like to comment, I'm disappointed one of my colleagues insinuated I don't know what's going on. I think I clearly stated at the end, I was not prepared to give information on the exact firm that Mr. McLean worked for or anything of that nature. I stated clearly that I thought it was beneficial for the citizens and residents viewing this meeting to know what his relationship was and where he was employed. So I have attended numerous meetings about this and well versed in
So
the
about the
issues.
tower, Mayor, remember I was getting shut off on that kind of conversation.
What? I'm sorry. Vice Mayor, do you have a point of order or point of inquiry?
You cut me off when I went sideways, not talking about the tower, so I expect
The
off.
Alderman Sanders, you have the floor, sir. Continue with your comments.
Thank you. That being said, this has gone on for a period of 18 months. I want the citizens to know that I've read every email that you've sent me. Hundreds of pages literally have hit my email box. I, as Alderman Gibson have met with many of you prior to our pandemic isolation at coffee shops and out in town. You've run into me in various places, and I've lent my ear to every concern that you've given. I have conducted a great amount of research on my own. We talked at several occasions with our technology commission. There was never an official vote by the commission whether they support this or not. I can't speak for the current task force that is in operation because I'm not a member, but for full disclosure, I want the citizens to know I live on Prestwick Drive, which is not far from Dogwood School. I currently have AT&T cell service. It's my understanding that currently AT&T has not agreed to be housed on this tower. I don't know what would be decided later. There's been numerous points brought up lately, especially just this last week on our Citizens to Be Heard emails. I think we've addressed those here tonight. I ran a campaign a little over a year ago and promised the citizens that I would work to improve our cellular service in Germantown. This part of Germantown is not the only place we have issues. And I realize that because I hear from many of you in other locations also. Please know that Germantown does not build cell phone towers. It's not the business of the city to build towers and to rent space. More and more across the country, we are seeing cellular transmission facilities and telephone transmission facilities, radio facilities being placed on large pieces of property, many times owned by utilities or cities, schools, or churches. That's just the nature of what's going on because as density increases, there are fewer and fewer places to build towers. Many residents told me throughout this period of time that there were plenty of other places to have towers other than Dogwood School. My frequent reply would be, please advise me where those are, let me know where they are, and I will discuss those with Tower Ventures, Mr. Fahey. And every time an individual sent me a potential location, I forwarded that to Mr. Fahey for their consideration. I've driven around in this triangle area numerous times looking for a piece of property that might fit or be appropriate for a cell phone transmission facility. I've found none. I might suggest in the future that maybe we could look at some exceptions in our code, but that's for another time, maybe to take
15 seconds, Alderman.
take into account for topography that might give us additional locations. But that being said, I will say that my intention is to support the placement of this tower. I know many may not be happy with me, but I know others will. And I promise I have given fair consideration to all sides.
Thank you, Alderman. Further discussion?
I just want to
Yes,
give
Mayor.
a point of order first.
Point of order, Vice Mayor.
Point of information, excuse me.
Point of information.
I have talked as the chairman of the cell tower. I have talked to AT&T, and their plans are to be on the tower after it's built at this time. Just a little
Thank you for that added information. Thank you. Further discussion?
Yes, Mayor.
Alderman Massey, you're recognized and have the floor.
So to Alderman Sanders' point about not having land, I think what I would say is that as long as the government steps in to provide private corporations with land at a cheaper price than they could get from a private individual, those private corporations have no incentive to go out and pay what a private individual would ask for their land. So I think that should be taken into consideration.
On that, Mayor? Point of information?
What is your point of information? What is your point of inquiry?
I guess my inquiry is that has this particular property been given to them by our government?
The answer to that is no, but let Alderman Massey continue, please, and please discontinue unless you've got something that is point of order or point of inquiry. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Alderman Massey, you have the floor.
Okay. Germantown residents purchased homes near Dogwood Elementary with the reasonable expectation that the land would remain zoned for use as an elementary school and children's playground without the risk of private corporations suddenly claiming part of the land for a cell tower, which will be an attractive nuisance, an eyesore, and potentially have hazardous effects on hundreds of children who will become captive guinea pigs for the long hours and months they are in close proximity to the new cell tower. Now, previous elected officials determined that the best use for the land was as a public elementary school and children's playgrounds, and hundreds of families purchased homes in the surrounding neighborhoods with a reasonable expectation that these uses would be preserved. I contend that it is unwise and unfair for the current elected officials to disregard the decisions of previous boards and suddenly seize the public's property to arbitrarily further the business interests of a private corporation whose purpose is to maximize values for its shareholders, and those interests are not always aligned with the best interest of the public. Government should not rob the public of its natural resources anytime executives from private corporations claim they have a better use for city or school property. I understand Alderman Sanders has some conflicts with the vote tonight, but I would ask him and my other colleagues to vote no, or to allow us to postpone this until we can go through and have someone tell us if the city and the city attorney possibly violated the ethics laws and their own professional standards by having people working both sides of this deal, potentially to the detriment of the public. Again, I'd like to remind my colleagues that it's not our responsibility to build cell towers. It's not our responsibility to find land for private corporations to increase convenience of making cell calls. You know, it's our responsibility to protect the public. And I personally believe that we would do more good by not agreeing to give up the public school property for a private cell tower corporation to use as a cell tower site. Again, I contend that if the cell tower company was interested in finding land further away from the school, they could do that, but it would cost them much more money because you're not going to have a private landowner who is likely going to be willing to enter into a lease agreement or sell their property for the price that the Germantown School Board has agreed to lease the public land. So again, given what we've learned tonight, I would ask my colleagues to vote no or agree to postpone this
15
until someone
seconds.
opportunity to look at the conflicts that seem to be apparent in all of the actions that have taken place on and off the record. I'll be voting no.
Thank you, Alderman. Any further discussion?
Yes,
Hey, I
Mayor.
would like
Alderman Gibson, you have the floor.
Thank you. In speaking with, well, first of all, Alderman Sanders, I appreciate your comments. Speaking to the difficulty of weighing public safety with the concerns that all of our citizens have about this issue. So I would simply say, in speaking with our first responders, fire, police, ambulance, I believe that this is a life or death necessity for some of our most vulnerable citizens. Having been in the area of the July storm, knowing that our fire chief was not able to make phone calls during that time, I see that necessity. And again, as elected officials, we're responsible. We've got to do our due diligence. We've got to listen to both sides and weigh all those facts to make an informed decision based on what we do know. And again, I feel like that's what I'm doing tonight. That's my job, representing the citizens of Germantown. And so when I speak with those parents who speak for, they are the voice for their children and for their families at their beloved school, I hope and pray that they know that my decision is due to the lack of cellular coverage and the capacity in that area, and consider this a public safety need. One of my colleagues brought up that this would be politicizing, using public safety over actual need. And I don't think that anyone that is familiar with this area would believe that. And so I will be supporting this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Alderman Gibson. That concludes everyone's time on the floor this evening.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, our city attorney, please.
before there's a vote, I think I need to clarify for some the law on this. Mr. Massey raised the issue of health effects of radio frequency emissions. And from the very beginning of this whole process, that has been an issue. That was an issue the first time that the application went through the process. And that was the reason that the people living around there, people who had children in schools, opposed it. And they tried to raise issues about health effects of radio frequency emissions. Well, we are bound by the Telecommunications Act of 1996. And Section 332 of that act puts limitations on local governments in terms of permitting the wireless transmission facility. So, number one, the local government shall not prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting the provision of personal wireless services. That's part 7B, little I, capital 2I. Further, it says that a local government shall not deny a request to place, construct, or modify personal wireless transmission service facilities. And if it does, they shall be in writing and supported by substantial evidence contained in a written record. And finally, and most directly to the point raised by Mr. Massey, a local government authority may not regulate the placement, construction, or modification of personal wireless service facilities on the basis of the environmental effects of radio frequency emissions to the extent that such facilities comply with the Commission's regulations concerning such emissions. That means that area is preempted by the Federal Communications Commission. So if the wireless facility satisfies the FCC, then that's the end of the issue. So that
Point
is
of
not
order, Mayor.
that we should consider.
What's your point of order, Alderman Massey?
Well, we've already ended debate, and your attorney has been allowed to interject his opinion.
That's fine. It's not his. He's stating the facts that are in front of you, so that you have that to be able to make a decision. Attorney McLean, could you conclude, or your comments are concluded, are they not? You are reaching the end.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Well, I have a point to make, which is that I don't.
Alderman Massey, what is your point of order?
If he's going to be allowed to continue to talk, we should have the opportunity to rebut what he's saying.
This is not a debate with the city attorney. He is just providing information for the board. So your point of order is not well taken. Attorney McLean, please conclude your remarks, please.
Yes, that is information for the board, trying to keep you from making a mistake in terms of what you would do. Based on the law, and as I understand it, and have interpreted it, as well as case law, which is pretty strong on the issue. Secondly, and I have to respond to this, I do not have a conflict of interest. I've been involved in this from the very beginning, but to say or intimate that I have a conflict of interest, or my firm does, is totally incorrect, and I welcome anybody.
Point of order.
Thank you. Thank you, Attorney McLean. What is your point of order, Alderman Massey?
Mr. McLean is again misconstruing.
What is your point? What is your point of order? Your point of order is about parliamentary procedure, not about opinion. You have
the attorney should. It's not an opinion. You just said he was given facts, and he just gave misinformation.
He concluded with a concluding statement. If you'd like to take that up with him, do that on your own time.
No, we have reached. Do that in the public debate.
We have reached the end of
motion.
debate. We have reached the end of debate, and the motion has been properly forward, or has been properly brought forward and seconded.
I'd like to make a motion to postpone.
That has already been done, sir.
Well,
Clerk,
not
please
after
call the roll. Clerk, please call the roll. We're done with debate, sir.
I have a motion, Mayor.
Alderman Yonda?
I have a motion.
The question is on the floor, and we've gone through the debate process. Go ahead, Alderman Yonda.
This is a motion made after discussion, Mayor. It's appropriate for consideration.
You made a motion to postpone that has already been placed on the table and has already been voted upon.
Facts
You do not have the floor right now, sir. The clerk is calling the roll.
To appeal your decision to the board.
The clerk is in the roll call, sir. Please refrain from interrupting.
I have asked for an appeal.
Go ahead.
Alderman Yonda?
The answer is yes. Thank you.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Alderman Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Alderman Massey, please unmute your phone.
Alderman Massey?
Alderman Massey, please unmute your phone.
Mayor, you muted me to begin with.
That is correct. I just did so we could go through roll call. You have been called on the roll. Would you like to vote?
I would like to incorporate the information that was sent to us in the form of the memorandum.
Would you like to vote? It's yes, no, abstain. I'll give you one more opportunity, and then we will put you as abstain. What would you like to vote, sir?
My vote is no. My vote is no.
Thank you. That concludes the vote. The motion does carry, and we have reached the conclusion of our meeting this evening. I appreciate all the aldermen's ability to conduct the meeting and to bring forth good information. We are now concluded. We are adjourned. Have a good evening. Thank you.